Greetings and welcome everyone to the final session of our webinar series. What is your activism strategy? We need a power shift to win. Next slide. So this webinar is being presented to you by People Power Health. Our goal is to build a learning community of healthcare professionals to help effectively organize and respond to each other, our patients, and the changes that we would like to see in community. Let me introduce you here to Hedja Storchuk, our Executive Director and Lead Trainer, our Samuel Gonzalez, Trainer and Project Manager, Nevena Basic, our Admin and Tech Guru, and again, my name is Brian Archie. I am a Trainer and Community Manager. Next slide. Just to identify some roles during this webinar today, Sam will be working as our chat monitor and timekeeper, and Nevena will be sharing the slides and helping us out here with tech support. So if you will, just to highlight, back one slide, please. If there are any questions or concerns during this time that we'll have together, which should be about 45 minutes, please leave any questions in the chat or use the raise hand feature in the Zoomiverse. Your mic, if you would, please keep it off if you are not speaking, just to dull out any background noise and just to make sure we're just being respectful of each other as we're going through this here today. And if possible, we know technology is often an issue. If you can keep your camera on, just so we can see some faces to help with our engagement, that would be wonderful. And next slide. And so we just like to make sure and acknowledge that while there are several avenues to learning, like the art of organizing and leadership, our core training pedagogy is based upon community organizing methods that have been developed by Professor Marshall Gans from the Harvard Kennedy School. For those that do not know Marshall, he has had over 30 years of organizing experience, beginning with Cesar Chavez and the Farmers Movement. And he was also active in the Mississippi Summer Project of 1968. Next slide. So just a short agenda. Again, just a welcome to the community. We will have an overview via video from our Executive Director of the HEART program that you'll hear a little bit more about later. We will talk about, and I see what strategy is and its relation to power. We will have a video that will outline a community organization in Niagara Falls and really just show some of the processes that we will be talking about today. And there will be a closing and call to action. So we'd like to start out our meetings really just to keep it light and be very welcoming to each other. And to learn a little bit about each other, right? So our check-in question for today is, if you were writing a how-to book, what would the title be? And if you could put those answers in the chat, that would be great. How to prepare a taco. That is definitely an art, Sam. I watch a lot of cooking shows, so I get where you're coming from. What else is there? How to keep a dog happy. Oh, great. Okay. Next slide. So we will have a few words again via video from Pedja about HEART and why healthcare professionals can also be organizers. And let's cue up to play, Nevena.
Thank you, Brian, and welcome everybody. So my name is, as Brian said, my name is Pedja Storčić, and I'm an Executive Director of People Power Health. Aside from the webinar series that we're doing today, next Tuesday, and then the Tuesday after, we also want to introduce the health activism and reflection training that we're going to launch in the fall. That is actually a little bit more than just a training, because it's an initiative with an aim to increase clinician-led activism and community organizing efforts to advance health equity and justice. And the curriculum that we created for HEART, for the health activism and reflection training, is there to address like couple of things that we faced as clinicians. I'm a clinician myself. I'm a physician, and you know, our current healthcare system, the way it is organized, is in many cases making us feel powerless and divided into our own organizational spaces, into our own kind of like divided places where we cannot bring our full selves into it. And I felt that multiple times through my career, and I know I've heard that from a lot of clinicians around the country. That is one of the biggest challenges to their activism, is that they are. Thank you, Baron, and welcome every problems that we face, especially the problems that are happening in the community. So we are trained really well to address medical issues of our patients, but when it comes to social issues that they face, we don't get an official training how to do that. And community organizing and activism can teach us that. And we are building this community and this initiative to address some of those things. And then finally, last but not the least, that the way you know, activism is practiced in most cases is this lone wolf style of advocacy. We call it a lone wolf because it's a you know, you do it alone. It's expected for you as a doctor, as a nurse, as a social worker to do most of the work of advocating for your communities and for your patients by yourself. And we're trying to challenge that and really bring a new way of doing things, which requires building a community around you, engaging other people, and feeling less lonely, and therefore hopefully address some of the issues like burnout and disengagement that happens to many people who are in this space of health advocacy and activism. So this is the beginning of our journey in many ways, and we're going to send you more information and more details about the health activism and reflection training coming in the fall. But for now, I think you're going to get a preview of one particular practice, like storytelling, that Brian is going to introduce, that we cover in more details during the training and this program. So back to you, Brian, and thank you.
Thank you, Peja. Next slide. So our brief goals or points of interest we really want to touch on today is really to learn the relationship between power and resources, to learn the relationship between goal setting and time, and then to learn how to select tactics which will advance our strategies. Welcome, Daniel. Next slide. So strategizing. Let me just ask, what is strategizing to you? Does anyone have an idea or concept? Maybe you can either unmute or drop something in the chat. Create a plan. Okay. So in the organizing sense, in the organizing sense, right? Strategizing is turning what you have, your resources, the how. Yes, Daniel. Turning what you have, your resources, into what you need, power, and that's to get what you want. That's change, right? So strategizing can be really scary, but believe it or not, we all have the capacity to strategize and to get done what we need, or what our people need. We do it every day. For me, it is thinking about like how we can use those resources creatively and intentionally to get these things done. I immediately began to think about when I was younger, right? Spent many a summer with my grandmother, and there was 8 or 9 of us that were there from morning to afternoon, waiting on moms to come home from work. And my grandmother, who didn't work, by the way, it was just my grandfather who was supporting the family, found a way and means to feed us and care for us, right? With you know what little they had, and take care of her grown kids, like at the same time. Like nobody went without, nobody left there hungry. And it's just, you know, she found a way to utilize what was right in front of her without waste. and making sure that it went where it was supposed to. Um, it's wow, right? So what do we have? What are your resources if I was to ask right now before we move any further? Can anybody identify some resources that you have presently? Time, one of the most important. So when I start to think about it from an organizing sense, our resources are right people, yes, time, some money, some finances, right, knowledge, and then we turn it around and think about like what do we need? Knowledge, know-how, yes. What do we need comes from our people, and that's something that we will get into very shortly, is like identifying who our people are and what is the change that they are looking to have. Strategizing is really about shifting resources to get the change for that your people are looking for, and we do that together. So let's go to next slide, please. So just some organizing questions that are focused around the doing to really get us focused, right? So who are my people? We've already tried to identify that. And so if we're working in the healthcare space, our people could either be our patients or the colleagues that we're actually working side by side with. What is the change that they need? Some are looking for improved access to care. Some of our colleagues may be looking for better working conditions. We don't know. What is your theory of change? And so your theory of change is really a hypothesis about how our constituents can use their resources to create the power that they need to achieve the change that they want. Our strategic goal, right? What is our end game? What are we working towards, right? And then tactics and timeline. Tactics are how, and the timeline is really sticking back to like keeping things time bound, having a specific start and end to the campaign that we are working within. Next slide. So another way of asking those questions is using an organizing sentence, right? And I am organizing who to achieve whatever the strategic goal is for the pursuit of, like, what is our shared purpose? By what date? Again, time bound, being very specific and intentional. And then the how, like what actions are going to get us to our strategic goal, right? Meaning that they have to be meaningful and intentional when we are pursuing them. So like an example for me would be around the 91st Street Park. And there's a short video that you will be able to watch in a little bit. And if I'm thinking about it in that sense, Create a Healthier Niagara Falls Collaborative, and it's an organization here that I am a part of. And one of the resident-driven projects was really around access to park space. And there's a community of folks that realized like there are moms in the neighborhood, there are kids playing, but when folks wanted to go out and walk, there weren't any sidewalks literally around this park for them to walk safely. Like folks had to be in the street with strollers and things of that nature. And so an organizing statement in terms of with that project in mind would be like, I am organizing, 10 community members to get sidewalks installed to improve the walkability at the park by June 1st by petitioning the city council and planning board, right? For funding, planning, et cetera. So again, it's identifying like community members, right? So these are people that are immediately affected by the lack of sidewalks. We're figuring out like what it is that we need, right? The actual construction of the purpose, access and improved health outcomes, walkability, if nothing else, just for the neighborhood, and being really specific about when they wanted it done, right? If we were just to go to the city and say, hey, we We kind of want you to do this, and do it at your own leisure. I mean, what do you think would have occurred without like a deadline or due date? Goes on, right? I see your head, Daniel. Right, so it goes on the agenda, and we'll talk about it a couple of times, and then decide if and when this thing will happen. And the initial how was really going to bringing this to the council and planning board to just like it will never right, Sam, it would never happen. To go to them and say like nobody had ever brought this up before, and so like, hey, this is an issue we want addressed. And believe me, it took several council meetings and signed petitions and going through contractors and unions. It took a little bit to actually get what should seem easy done. So yeah, next slide. So I was just thinking about, right, when we think about leadership and, the head, heart, hands, when we think about leadership and leadership challenges, like, does anybody look for who's the leader of something when things are going well? Like, rotation was great today. No patients had complaints, right? Everybody got to clock in and clock out. It was a good, nobody's coming around to see who's in charge, right? Let a couple of nurses have some issue. Patient maybe gets injured, right? Supplies aren't in for some reason. Folks are coming around asking who's in charge, who's running the show. And so when we think about like an example of that would be like, right now, the pandemic, right? Of how people look for leadership, right? Can I speak to your manager? Right, Daniel, all the time. People look for leadership not when things are fine, but when things are not going well and when there's uncertainty of what's going to happen. And to learn to like really exercise leadership in those type of situations, we have to begin to think strategically, right? A plus B equals C, like how are we going to get these things done? What resources do we need to make them happen? And then there needs to be some sort of motivational piece, right? The how and where we find the courage and hope to actually move forward in these places of uncertainty. Great tool that we, again, was mentioned in webinar 1 was really about storytelling and how we actually share our values, values with people and find ways to find and share courage and hope to move things forward when we're in those places of uncertainty. So, and then skills, right? Finding the skills necessary to move forward and really put those two pieces together and get the things done that we need. Next slide. So in our community, in an organizing community, we define leadership as, again, accepting responsibility for enabling others to achieve a shared purpose in the face of uncertainty, right? So we identify here that we can't remove the uncertainty, but what we can do intentionally is empower people so that they can engage with the uncertainty in creative and constructive ways, right? Like organizing is a practice of a particular type of leadership that is about developing the leadership of others and enabling the community to use their resources to build power and create change, right? So we're not providing a service, we're not doing any advocating work, and we're not marketing. We're really trying to figure out how collectively we can build and move forward. Does anybody have like maybe an example of a moment of leadership that they had, either in your profession or maybe in your personal life? And like you can feel free to unmute and maybe just share. You look like you're thinking, Daniel. I'm gonna call you in.
Yeah, and my camera's not even that good. You can already tell that I was thinking about something. No, I mean, I hold some different leadership positions here in my institution. I'm at the University of Washington, in Seattle, Washington. But Yeah, I mean, right now for the Department of Medicine that I work in. I'm uh, the chair of our diversity council, and so that is one of my bigger leadership positions. And it's one that anytime I have these kinds of trainings, I probably think about the most is, again, getting people who are volunteering their time to improve kind of EDI issues within our department, how to get us moving forward. Because oftentimes I feel like even though I'm trying really hard, it's we talk about a lot, but we don't necessarily accomplish as much as we talk. So, but everybody's on the same page, which is good. It's just the forward movement, I think, is what's hard.
Right. So, again, coming back to how do you connect your value systems and then strategically think, how do we move to a place of action? Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Next slide. So power, like what is power? Definitely an important concept in organizing, because organizing at its core is about reconfiguring power and its position. So what do we mean by power? And then we're thinking about, Dr. King stated that power is the ability to achieve purpose. So there are many different ways to think about creating change. And some problems may be a problem of information, in which, like, to empower them, we get people the information. Or it could be some sort of technical issue, and that means that we fix the technology and make sure that people are able to use what they have. But when it comes to a problem of power, it turns out that there's actually a misalignment, motivation and authority, right? So either those who have the motivation to make change, like, lack the authority or capacity, meaning there's no base from which they're moving, or those that actually have the authority lack motivation to do anything. And that's because people don't, nobody's sharing power willingly. Like, can anybody give me an example maybe of a power problem that you faced maybe more recently, and what you did? Maybe Dr. Verduzco?
Maybe in trying to motivate some of the, I work as an oncologist, and I sometimes have wanted to motivate the fellows to do some research projects, but because of their other responsibilities, maybe they don't have enough time. And I have tried to convince, for example, my boss, my head of the department, to maybe move some other responsibilities in order to for them to have time for other projects.
Okay. So what it sounds like is there is interest, but you're lacking resources to actually get this get it resolved. So do you think that is a what kind of power is it? Because there's a couple of different types. So you're seeking power with, it sounds like there's almost a power over type of situation that you're working through.
Yeah, you could say
that. Okay. Next slide, please. So that leads us into this next piece of our discussion, right? So power is relational, meaning its basis is in resources kept or resources needed by an individual or organization. And to put it simply, right? Let's think about it in this way. Situation arises here at work, and I have a friend who needs a ride home. In that situation, right? I have the car, they need a ride home. Like, who holds the power there?
You have the car, you.
Okay. Good thought. Next slide. So what if I say this? Yes, I have the car, but it's on empty, right? I have virtually no gas. But you, my friend has money for gas, right? So now we're in a space of we're sharing resources, right? We're sharing resources with each other. And we've built a relationship based upon that, where now there is a power with. I have something that they need, and they have something that I need. So now we are in a place of a shared relationship and sharing power to get done what we both need. I need to leave and they need to get home. So, I think, Dr. Verduzco, so how maybe could you think about that in terms of getting the work done with your colleagues?
Maybe someone has an interesting research idea. That project becomes a reality, would give them, for example, more research publications or more stuff for their curriculum, and maybe that could be a benefit for those that could be interested in research.
So now they're motivated, right? So the situation is presented in a different way, but there's a different motivation to what could be achieved if you begin to share the space together. And that's right. So folks need to be interested and motivated to move. Again, just like thinking back to the fact that folks don't share power like willingly. So thank you for sharing. Next slide. And this is really just to show, like, whether there's one or two of us, someone could still have, an individual or organization could still hold the power over in us, because they are still not seeing the values in our resources or interests as far as, what the positions that they are actually holding. Next slide. But again, once we begin to meld our values and we see what our shared purposes can be, and allowing us both to get our goals to completion, we find places to where it becomes, it moves from that power over back to a power with, to get our campaigns done. Next slide. So organizing, has anyone ever had like an organizing campaign going? Okay, so organizing in a nutshell is about, again, and we'll continue to hear these words, right? Turning the resources we have into the power, and the power is in the people and capacity that we need to achieve the changes that we are looking for. So, like, just remembering, and we'll continue to discuss this, and we'll hear it again if you're to join in with us in Heart in October, like that it starts with the people, right? It starts with the people coming together and, not being told what they're doing, but coming to that moment on their own and identifying what their agency, like in those spaces, to be able to move forward and to start to affect change. Next slide. So in the organizing sense, right, we think about, okay, people, power, change, right? So if I were to ask any of you, like, who are your people? Who would you identify as your people that you're working for change towards? And you can feel free to unmute. So I would say, for me, it would be the community of Niagara Falls, more specifically, the people that live in the north end of the city, where there is high poverty, high crime, and most definite food deserts. Daniel, you're unmuting.
Yeah, I mean, I think of like different groups, but I think, like, I try to, often I'm working to try to advance EDI here, and like I said, in the department and the School of Medicine, and so I think of a lot of times as like the faculty and staff that are my colleagues. But also the people really ultimately it's the patients that we care for, and the improvements in health that they'll get as a result of the initiatives that we're doing. So I think sometimes it's a lot of different, not a lot, but it can be multiple different groups of people.
Absolutely. Dr. Verduzco, were you going to share?
I was gonna say the same. On one side are patients, and on the other, all of my colleagues.
So, thinking just as healthcare professionals, I think this is almost true for just about all of us in a sense, right? Because and I'm not a medical physician, but I've worked directly in a hospital, and my patients were the folks I was out educating, peer educating, in regards to cancer health in our community. And then it's, like my colleagues, my other peer educators that worked with me, like how do we meet people where they are and make sure that we're speaking the language and we are being thoughtful about the conversations we're having and people's decisions on what they want to or not to do, right? So, what about you talked about change and that EDI work. Have your patients maybe given any ideas as to things that they would like to see that have helped you frame the work with the larger group? And I'm probably jumping way ahead, right?
Can you repeat that question?
I was just wondering in the EDI work Daniel was speaking of, had the patients maybe given any ideas as to that you were able to take back and just, to the group, and like maybe frame into your plan?
Yeah, I don't know if it happens directly. I think it goes back to that power of story and power of narrative. And I think while our own kind of individual narratives are always helpful when you're trying to get people to join onto your cause, I think the way the patients usually show up is that you're kind of representing their story because they're not usually at the table. It's like we're speaking about them almost like theoretically, like there's this patient that experiences this inequity and we need to make it better, but often they're not there to tell their own story. So I think it is an interesting idea to find ways to bring the patient in, or the people that we care for, because that might motivate people better. So
I'm literally sitting here thinking like, at the next meeting, maybe you have a patient that says, hey, I'd like to come and share first person and see how that motivates and encourages the larger committee, right, to move to the next level. But thank you again for sharing. Next slide. So just when we talk about I wanted to introduce this slightly. We talk about campaigns being specific and time bound, really meaning that like we have a start and an ending to it, right? Something that we used here with Create a Healthier Niagara Falls Collaborative, right? This looks like a regular timeline. Our thinking about it though was to plan in reverse, and something we call a reverse timeline, starting with our ending in mind, helped us to more specifically plan each step as we we're working through a project. So let me ask, has anybody ever planned anything before? And how was that process, Dr. Verduzco?
2 steps forward and 1 step back.
Right. So the easiest thing to think of, right, is like a birthday party, right? So we've all had a birthday party maybe at least once in our lives, and so like we're gonna have this grand thing going on, and we're looking for 100 people to attend it, and thinking with that goal in mind, how do we work backwards at each of these steps? So we start to think about peaks. in our campaign to get us to our end goal, right? So each peak maybe being increments of 25 folks and opportunities to reevaluate that step forward and step back to change our tactics to make sure we increase our capacity and get to our overall number. Am I making sense with that? Okay. So what I would like to do now, I've mentioned to you several times about, right, who are my people, what resources do we have, what is the change that they are looking to see, and we talked about this timeline being, specific, intentional, having a specific start and end date. And I want to, next slide, introduce you to Create a Healthier Niagara Falls Collaborative. And again, this is a short video to help identify some of those topics that we discussed, centering around the 91st Street park improvements. So afterwards, I'm going to have a few questions of debrief, and then we will get this webinar closed out. So if you could hit play, Nevina, thank you.
The 91st Street Park is one of those things where probably the last time the swings or the equipment had been replaced, my God, it probably was like in the 70s or something.
I was told that this swing set has never been replaced and has been there for many, many years. You can see the many different layers of paint.
The park did not have any sidewalks,
which meant that anytime we wanted to come here, we had to basically walk on the street or force a stroller through the grass. We got a bunch of people together to talk about if other people were interested in advocating for an additional sidewalk all the way around the park. In 2018, the first side of the sidewalk you can see was paved. So this has been really good.
Now there's a beautiful playground out there. They have kids out there playing and enjoying it. People are going and walking now because there is a place to walk where before there wasn't a sidewalk.
This playground has meant so much to us because we are able to bring the kids over here to have somewhere to play and something to do where they can get outside and work off some energy in a safe environment.
I think that's one of our biggest successes.
So as a member of the collaborative, I will say that was a very proud moment. But if I would ask, so who are our people?
The neighbors, the community that live there.
Thank you. Thank you. And easily identifiable, what was the change? Dr. Verduzco?
I think the improvements with the sidewalks and also with the playground.
Right. And what resources did they have? What did they start with? So I'll answer because you may think that's a trick question. Each other, right? So literally, Sarah is a resident of 91st Street. My friend she's been here in the US for some years, but is from Belgium, which she's recently back there now. She moved to the neighborhood with her family, and from where the open access that she was used to, she's like, this just isn't right. She had kids, and next thing you know, it's like, well, we want to have a sidewalk. They started with petitions, right? They knew what the goal was. They started with petitions, talking to the neighbors, getting folks out, meeting people, walking in the street, right? Building that people power so that when it was time to go to City Hall and talk to the people that held the decision-making power, they were a unified front. And I will definitely say there were some step forwards and step backs, right? Specifically around the work and who was doing it. But in the end, like it took about a year or so. In the end, the sidewalk was completed, and yeah, definitely a great one, and real opportunity to see the process of building people power, having a strategy, having our people in line, knowing what the changes that they are wanting to see, and being able to move together on a unified front from that space. So next slide. So as we look to close out here, just to summarize, right? Successful organizing achieves three things, not just the one. So we probably feel like, okay, well, there's a strategic goal that's completed. We're all set. But there's some byproducts of the process to getting to that, through that timeline into that strategic goal. And it's one, the organizations that we are in actually shifts structurally. The power dynamics move around, and motivation and authority it usually increases in the space. People see what a win looks like. Folks that were maybe quiet now have agency and are stepping up to do other things. And another not another byproduct would be individuals, right, are learning new skill sets, ways of thinking, and finding opportunities for them to exercise their agency in different ways. Leaders are developed just as a byproduct of the organizing process. If it is again done in an intentional type of way, to see it through. So excuse me, we would like to thank you for being here on this evening with us, and really just diving into what strategizing can do for a campaign for you and the folks that you are organizing or working with. Next slide. And we would like to say that if we are continuing to be intentional, right? So like we use strategy to build power, to move from the lone wolf activism into this huge, robust community. And this is, and it takes a larger structure for that. And this is our snowflake model, right? But how do we get here? So in webinar 1, we talked about storytelling. And then in webinar 2, we brought on how one-on-ones help us to build those intentional relationships. These tools with intentionality help us to increase capacity, not just for the individuals, but for the collectives on the team and their organizations. And lastly, we learn to develop a plan and strategy together using our newfound resources, right, to make the change that we want to see in our communities and organizations. So, it sounds corny, but like it works if you work it, right? So we would like to thank you again for being here and just for learning and sharing with us. Next slide. And if any of what you heard today and or information that you have received really resonates with you, Heart is set to begin in October. And we will definitely have some information forwarded to everyone that attended today, just for you to read a little bit into it and see if you would be obliged to come aboard and continue the learning journey with us here at People Power Health. So thank you very much, and peace and blessings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gracias.